Welcome to Let's Talk Brock.
Okay, welcome to this episode of the Let's Talk Brock podcast. Today we are joined by Brittany Stewart, a Brock alumna living in Hamilton. Brittany completed her Bachelor of Arts with a combined major in Dramatic Arts and English before completing her Bachelor of Education at Brock. Brittany was heavily involved while at Brock and worked on campus in various places such as Student Life, the Welcome Desk, and Career Zone. Brittany was also a recipient of the Spirit of Brock Award at Convocation as a result of her leadership, community involvement, and much more. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brittany.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I was so excited about it.
Yeah, we're pumped to hear about your time at Brock, so we're going to hop right into the questions today.
Okay.
What made you choose Brock, and how did you decide on the Bachelor of Arts, Dramatic Arts, and English program?
Okay, so the degree that I ended up graduating with, I guess the first time since I did my degrees consecutively, right? So the undergraduate combined major in English and drama was actually a lot of working with my academic advisor on campus and deciding that was how it was going to be. Decisions of what about an English major and drama minor, or all these different options. And there was a time where I considered trying to get into Con Ed instead. But mostly my reason for choosing Brock was because I just knew how great of a teacher's college it had, and knowing my whole life, that kind of story, that I wanted to be a teacher. And I wanted to go to a school that had a good reputation for that. And I actually grew up in the Niagara region, and I was born in Burlington, moved to Fort Erie and lived there my whole life, really came back to Burlington for high school. So the natural migration back to the Niagara region felt really good for me. So it felt like home, and I loved that about being able to go to Brock. And I was never regretful of my decision for many reasons that I'll share today. So yeah, I think my decision to choose Brock had a lot to do with it feeling like home. It was far enough away that I got my independence that I really craved. Niagara is such a beautiful setting for school, and Brock having the best reputation, and the fact that, its reputation for the arts now in particular. I'm so proud to be an alumna of Brock, knowing that I was kind of a part of its transition into what it is today. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you touch on Brock being a place that felt like home for you, because I know a lot of our students share that. So that's awesome that was that place for you. Were you involved in any experiential learning to get experience in your field outside of the classroom?
Yeah, so I guess as anybody who's planning to teach in particular, it's a necessity, a requirement, whether or not. So if you're in Con Ed, you're getting that experience as part of your classes. But as someone who knew that I would eventually do teacher education, I spent a lot of time looking for opportunities. So not necessarily as part of courses, but I was just volunteering a lot. I found opportunities to volunteer at schools. Big Brothers Big Sisters is like the chapter in Niagara is a really amazing one to become a part of if students are thinking of getting involved. I volunteered in in an after school program. I also had a little sister that way. On top of that, I did other volunteering opportunities as part of actually working on campus. And I think that even though that a lot of those volunteering experiences were not necessarily exactly related to my degree or what I ended up doing, I think that there were still so many transferable skills related to that. So in terms of experiential learning, yes, the component of, especially when you get into your teaching degree in particular, you have your placements that you get as a result. But I think that there's some, even if you are not in courses that offer that, I think there's a lot of opportunities if you seek them out to get other experiences that can still work very well to translate into experience that's helpful outside of that.
Yeah, that's great. No, you definitely sound like a very busy badger.
I was a busy badger, and I have kept myself a busy badger still to this day.
That's funny. What is one opportunity you had while studying at Brock that you never thought was possible in high school?
So one opportunity that I never thought was possible was the co-op programs that I actually never once again, I never took advantage of these, but I know I had so many friends who did cool co-op programs, and then also in those same programs were going not just like, what you imagine when you're in high school, which is a co-op where maybe you're going to the next school over, like I did when I was in high school, volunteering or getting a credit for helping in a grade 6 classroom, but things that were like taking you completely out of town or like across the province. And then a lot of the same friends of mine then were brave enough to take leaps across the pond to do, a semester abroad as a result of that. So it's not that it was like groundbreaking information for me to see that these were all possibilities, but I never really thought about how there were so many cool stepping stones to being able to do that, which led me to working abroad after I graduated.
Well, I am so excited to ask you about that. We're going to get to that shortly. But our next question for you is, you worked various jobs and volunteered on campus. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in student employment?
Yeah, you know what? That's another one I should have said was I never really imagined the opportunity to work on campus, and how, great it would feel to have that option to fill my pockets of the day with a shift here, a shift there, right? So I started my working experience with, at the time it was called Community Connections. Now I think it's Student Life and Community Experience, or just Student Life. It transitioned into that when I was there, but just in case it changed again. Um, Working with like Kristen and Brad. I'm not sure if they're still working there, but it was such a great experience to start me off working on campus, because that's what got me volunteering the most. There's so many experiences that I never knew, like, Shinorama, what it meant to work behind the scenes on that, or just seeing how all of these different, the O Week stuff, how that worked behind the scenes. It gave me a different perspective on being a student, and a big respect for what it takes to make these types of programs that the university offers function, as I imagine you also, as an on-campus employee, understand, Tricia. So I loved that. I also loved, as part of that, and then everything kind of became divided, what is now visitor services at the welcome desk. I absolutely loved working at the welcome desk because it gave me the chance to connect with people I never would have imagined, right? Down to the security guards, like the just people that have become lifelong friends. Like, I'm still connected to a retired security guard from Brock, because, and he's like a family member to me in a way. We speak on the phone. Um, and I loved that I got to meet people and see people in that way, and it brought me confidence too. My favorite experience, and I mean, I loved them all, so if you're listening, I loved all my bosses. Wendy, I love all of you guys, but my favorite experience was definitely working in, it was career services then. I think that you guys call it just Career Zone now. I worked there for a few years, and I left there as a uh, senior career consultant or assistant. And I loved that as part of that job, you were basically just developing yourself. So we were constantly, if we were not helping someone with their resume, which, by the way, byproduct of that is building our own, we were working on projects given to us that were perfect for developing our own interests. And that is where I did most of my research for my and what made me brave enough to actually dive into going abroad. I truly think that if it weren't for that experience, I may not have ever moved over to England to teach there. So definitely a huge life-changing opportunity for me to have worked on campus for so many different reasons.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's something so special about working on campus. So I have to agree with you there. So everyone listening, work on campus. It's a place to go. It's a place to be.
There's so many opportunities to do
Yeah.
it, right? There's so many that will fit whatever your interest is. And it's just I mean, as aside from just making some extra money, that can help us all, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. But for our next question, after your undergraduate degree at Brock, what made you pursue a career in teaching? And how was your time in the consecutive education program at Brock?
Right. So I always knew, like I mentioned, that I wanted to go into a teaching degree. That was never a question. It was just knowing that I was doing it consecutively versus concurrently, which, by the way, if there's anyone listening who is I know that for some, there was this feeling of like imposter syndrome when I got to teachers college, that I'll admit, because I was doing it consecutively versus concurrently, like so many of my friends, because we were all together except the like 14 of us who were doing it consecutively in my cohort. We're all in one little group, right? So it was kind of like, oh, there's all the concurrent people and then we're the consecutives. But I think that I mean, that was kind of just me, us all being paranoid, and at the end of it all, we were all so well connected. I think it's important to remember that the experience that you have, if you want to go into teaching and you're like, well, I'm not in con ed, am I going to be ready for it? Do things to prepare yourself. If you know now, if you don't know and you decide that you want to go into that, don't be afraid. They do such a good job of offering professional development, and you get all the same resources as the others. I think that, yeah, it was never a question whether or not I would do it that way. And I think that when it came, especially as a high school teacher, I really value that I was able to focus my undergrad in the content, because teaching at the high school level in particular, you want to be you want to be a master of what you're teaching, right? You want to be able to, the students that, you want them to know, like, and trust you as their teacher. And I felt super confident, content wise, that what I had to offer was valuable to my students. So that's something that I really loved about that. And then, sorry, the other part of your question was about what made me decide. I'm sorry, Tricia,
Was
what was?
that just a little bit about the consecutive education program?
Yeah, so really no different in terms of that. I know it's 2 years now. I was the second last year to do it in one. But I believe it's the same, where it's really no different. Those 2 years are going to be the same as what your friends in Concurrent are doing. I was in a different cohort because there are certain additional things they offered, but like only a couple, really. So you're really not going to feel. I think the one thing that's different is just that instead of all through your degree, you're offered opportunities, like I said, for experiential learning, which are incredibly valuable. That's not offered to you, obviously, unless you seek it out yourself in your undergraduate. When it comes to the consecutive program, versus the concurrent program, the 2 years of teachers college, so to speak, I would assume are very similar still, because they were when I studied there.
Okay, very cool. That's awesome. So the question I've been so excited to ask you, it's finally here. How did you get involved teaching abroad? You touched on that a little bit, but can you tell us about your time teaching in England? How did you get involved in that?
Sure. So it was actually really easy when it came down to it. As soon as I reached out to some of these agencies, right? So as part of working at Career Services, I found out about opportunities to go to job fairs, that I then met a bunch of different agencies, in person, who gave me business cards, etc. Now, obviously, the state of the world right now, it's still, I mean, I feel like even aside from that, it would be just as easy to search it online. But do your research for sure. That's one big tip I have, because the agency I started with is not the agency I kept, for a variety of reasons. There are so many out there, so I definitely recommend that, if you don't know someone who's already done it, that you seek people out who have, because I think that's step one of being just careful of, because most, especially as teaching, you're going through an agency. So that's step one. But it was actually quite easy. As soon as I aligned with an agency, even though I changed from them, they helped me get my visa. They helped me get my, what they call a DBS, which is just like a police check. Um, they helped me figure out, how to get to my agency from my flight. Like, they gave me resources for finding somewhere to live or somewhere to stay, when I first got there. Like, there were so many amazing opportunities that were offered to me just right away through the agency. So if it weren't for that, I might have once again been a little shyer. And the fact that they make it really simple was perfect. Of course, once you get there, your confidence builds and you branch out. But it was nice to have that little cushion step to get me to a place where I felt, like my hand was being held when I needed it. I was pretty brave. I was a brave badger, and I definitely took chances. But when it came to that, I was so scared, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't. So having that support was really useful. And like I said, there's tons of agencies out there.
That is amazing. That is like my dream. So I love hearing you talk about it. You were a busy badger and a brave badger. I love that. But what are you currently doing? Like, I know you're teaching at a private school, so for future teachers watching, listening, can you tell us about your experience working in a private school?
Sure. So I guess I'll also add that when I was in England, I started out doing with the agency. I started out doing supply teaching, and they paid me a certain rate per day until and you'll if you decide to go do this, friends, what will happen is they're gonna to schools that like you will start offering you full-time jobs. So do your research on that too. When I found my perfect fit, it was awesome. I found a school that I loved, and I was able to teach both English and drama, and I was so respected there, and I absolutely missed it all the time. It felt really good to go somewhere that they needed teachers versus here at the time that I left in particular, there was just no room for me, it felt like. So it was great that there was a space for me to do that. And of course, the travel component was like no other. Like I had 6 weeks worth of breaks that on top of my summer. So the summer was 6 weeks, and then also 6 weeks throughout the year. So there's so many opportunities to travel, and so I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. And I know that right now things are tricky, but I definitely recommend that as soon as you're able to, if anyone has this interest, just go, because you're never going to regret that you're never going to regret trying, even if you're like, you know what, teaching abroad wasn't for me, because by the way, it's not. But even the people I know, because I know some that went and they're like, you know what, I didn't love teaching abroad, but I did love spending a few months abroad. So that was cool, right? So anyway, teaching at the school I taught at is probably what led me to choose private school here. And the reason being was it was a private school there. So it's different. It's completely different in England. There's not like public boards at all. There's different councils and different boards of trustees. And I was part of a certain trust. But yeah, so some schools are state schools and some schools are private. And so I was part of a private academy. And so I think my comfort level coming home was just going somewhere that gave me the flexibility. And that's kind of why I chose private. So to be honest, when I came home, I was expecting my son. So I moved home a bit earlier than I expected to, because my son's father was here, and so I came home and then had my son, and then right away had my daughter. It was pretty cool though, because I went on maternity leave from my school. So we did go back with my son for me to finish my contract when he was about 7 months old. And then we got to travel the summer as well while I was pregnant with my daughter. But anyway, it was pretty cool that I got all that opportunity just for, I was covered on mat leave twice. So pretty neat. But I came home and I just was, not just, it's a big job, raising my children for a few years. And I've only recently gone back to teaching. I started doing a workshop in December that led to a gig in January that now February 1st, so only about a month, I've been back to teaching full time as part of this private school in, what a surprise, Niagara on the Lake, Vine Ridge Academy, which has been a really great experience. And teaching online is very different, but I've actually really appreciated the flexibility of teaching online and having the chance to still see my children most of the day aside from my teaching hours. So I really, really love that part of it.
That's really cool. I love that. That's because I'm interested in private as well. So that's really cool. But just hearing how the transition from England and the different school boards, I didn't know that. I feel like a lot of our future teacher candidates at Brock don't know about that either. So this will be interesting for everyone
Good,
listening.
good. I'm
Yeah.
glad. Well, Tricia, this isn't normal, but what makes you interested if you want to share in teaching private? Because maybe that will help me answer your question.
Well, I think it's more, I had a wonderful high school experience at a private school. So I think it's
Ah,
yeah, so I had went to a private school for 3 years, so just, going to the school, I'd love to return to that school and teach, but, it's hard to know the difference between, the private boards and the public boards and what school to go to, so
right. Well, I mean, private schools have all different niches, right? So the
right.
one I'm currently at is an international school. So most of the students are actually living in their home countries right now. Normally they're living on campus.
Mhm.
But yeah, so there's like 5 of them that live on campus still. Whereas your school would have been more of like a private school that was for probably for children who wanted to have more flexibility in what they were learning about, right? So that's something that would be a dream for me to move on to next, because I think that I actually did right before I went to England. I did a performance master's degree at the University of Toronto. That was my in between step between Teachers College and England. So that was a really cool experience, and I think that that makes me want to stay in the private sector, because I know that my flexibility for what I can offer students is more open in the private setting.
Wow, that's so cool. That's really good to know, and good advice for everyone listening and interested in wanting to know the difference. So, now with all the advice that you've given us, what's one piece that you'd advice that you could share with our current teacher candidates?
Okay, so I love giving advice, but I also know that everyone's in a different place, right? So I think that the most important thing is, if you're hearing my story and you can relate, that makes me really happy. And I hope that if there was any nerves, like likely they've not gone away, but maybe subsided, if you are hoping to move on and do the same types of things that I've done. But if you're hearing my story and you're feeling like, oh well, I could never do that, I don't feel confident moving away across the pond, or I don't feel like I could teach in a private school, or any of the things that we've talked about, I think that just remember that you're in a school that has tons of resources to support you. And if you even have once thought about it, there's definitely someone you can talk to at Brock that can help you make it a plan, right? Instead of it just being like, maybe I could do that, but I'm too scared to even think about it. Think about it, ask. There's so many great people on campus who I treasure, who were a huge part of my journey. So yeah, I think my best advice is just don't leave university wishing that you had taken advantage of the on-campus opportunities, because right down to, like I say, working on campus was my first amazing stepping stone to doing what I do right now. And I'll treasure that forever. So don't leave with regrets. Just do it all. Do whatever you see available to you, because you're only there for so long, you guys, like 4 to 6 years.
Exactly. I know. So, note to self: be a busy badger. Get it
Yeah.
all done.
You won't regret it. You won't regret it. And it will give you a great work ethic when you're done.
No, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your Brock experience with us all.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
Bye, Brittany.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, you can contact us by email at futurestudent@brocku.ca.